大家好. Today we'll be replacing the water pump and the thermostat on the N52 engine on my BMW E91. The E90 series BMW uses an electric water pump, and the motor is a brushed design, which is prone to fail on high-mileage vehicles. Also, the propeller of the water pump is made of a composite material, which also has a tendency to fail. The water pump has an electrical connector here, and is held on by 3 bolts, which are aluminum, so you will need to have to replace those bolts. The water pump has 2 hose connections located on the rear, and the thermostat mounts onto the water pump by the 2 steel bolts here. You can reuse those steel bolts. The thermostat has 1 electrical connector located on the bottom, 2 hoses up front, which are held on by a metal clip, and 2 hoses on the rear, which are held on by a hose clamp. Replacing the water pump and the thermostat on rear-wheel drive BMW models should be pretty easy. However, on all-wheel drive or X-drive models, there is significantly less room to work with, so something just to be aware of. To remove the water pump, first I need to remove the cooling loop for the power steering. It's held on by this bracket, which is secured by 3 bolts. When you try to unscrew the nut, the rubber insulator wants to turn together with the nut. The rubber insulator has a flange on that, so all we need to do is use a wrench to hold on to the flange while loosening the nut. Next, we're going to remove this hose which connects to the thermostat. To remove this hose, there is a metal clip here. Use a hook tool to pick it up and push it up to a unlocked position. Next, we are going to remove this coolant hose also by picking up on the metal clip and pulling it off. Next, we need to remove the coolant hose on the back of the thermostat. There are 2 of them. One of them can be accessed from the wheel well area. By removing the front passenger side of the wheel and go into the wheel well area, and you can see the hose there. Use a 6mm wrench to loosen the hose. Lastly, we need to remove the last hose found here. You can access it by working underneath the vehicle from the front. Next, we need to remove the 2 bolts that hold the thermostat onto the water pump. The subframe blocks access to the bolts from underneath, so I use a boxing wrench to try to remove those. They are 10mm bolts and they are steel, so you can reuse them. To open up our access, we also need to remove the bracket for the sway bar and just let the sway bar hanging down there. After you remove the bolts for the sway bar is gonna stuck on this metal piece here, which is held on by a 10mm screw hidden behind on the subframe. You can use a ratcheting wrench to remove that screw. To open up our access, we also need to remove this cooling line. This cooling line is held on by 3 10mm screws. One of them is here. The other one is here. And the third one is hidden above there. Once all 4 hoses of the thermostat has been removed, you can unplug the electrical connector here and remove the thermostat from front. Next, we are going to remove the electrical water pump. It has a electrical connector connected to it, 2 E14 bolts here and here, and another E14 bolt on top here. It also has 2 hoses connected to it on the rear. We need to remove one of the hoses, and the other one should come out with the water pump. Here is the electrical connector removed. The electrical connector goes on like this. To disconnect it, you need to feel around to the back. Since I have it removed, let me just turn this around. You can see that on the back there is a place you can insert a screwdriver and depress a little tab that's hidden underneath that. Once you do that, you can just pull off this electrical connector Just keep in mind that the tab is hidden on the back side. The last hose clamp can be accessed from underneath the car behind the subframe. The electric water pump is held on by 3 aluminum bolts, one here, another one here, which are already removed. This bolt here is not for the water pump. That's actually holding on the AC compressor. So don't remove that, otherwise you will need to replace the bolt like I do. The third bolt is actually hidden just in front of the super long bolt. The third bolt is actually hidden just in front of the super long bolt. You can't see it, but you can feel where it is, and you can actually use a regular extension wrench to remove that bolt. Now with the old water pump out of the car, we just need to transfer the hose from the old water pump to the replacement unit, while noting the orientation of the hose, making sure it's the same as before. Reinstalling the water pump. The only hose that needs to connect is this one that goes to the side, and I'm gonna reorient the hose clamp so that it can be accessed from the front instead of from below, as from the factory. And other than that, nothing else to note, just 3 bolts to hold the water pump on. The bolts are tightened to 10 Newton meters with an additional 90-degree turn. This is what the water pump looks like with everything installed. I haven't installed the cooling loop or the sway bar yet, so I'm gonna bleed the cooling system, make sure there is no leak or anything before I tighten everything up. The way to bleed the cooling system is to turn the accessories on without turning on the car. Then turn the heat on to maximum. And turn the fan speed to low. Then press on the accelerator pedal until you hear the water pump going. And here is the sound of the water pump doing its thing, bleeding the system. Didn't see any leak, so that's good. We're gonna let it run. It's gonna run for like 12 or 15 minutes. Okay, I have put everything back together, other than this one. So the sway bars are held on by those 30mm bolts, tightened to 16 Newton meters. This bracket is very difficult to install because you cannot see where the bolt goes. So you kind of need to feel around on the subframe and install that. You can use a 10mm ratcheting wrench to install the bolt. There are 3 bolts holding the cooling loop onto the subframe, one here, one on the other side, and the third one is hidden in there. Again, that one is very difficult to see, very difficult to get a wrench on, so you just need to be patient. That's it for today's video. So until next time, and happy DIYing. 再见。